This class. This is a weekly live stream. Do participate in the live chat. This week's show is mainly about the reality of life, what it is that we really we need to be happy. We don't actually need much to be happy, but we in the materialist world have made the the task of being happy really difficult. Second half is a live Q&A. I call it live. Any questions about life you have, please do ask. We can talk about it. My actually it says Adil here. It was my brother Adil, but now it's my son Saleh who's joining me. All the happiness truths I talk about here are based on ancient religion, science, and logic. So hopefully you don't have to believe what I've got to say. Hopefully it'll make sense. Do press the like button if you like what you've got to hear. Hopefully you spread the word about what I'm doing here. So let's quickly start with the first bit. Why is being happy so hard? I'll paste that up there. There we go. Right. So as I say, these are ancient spiritual truths based on different religions, but mainly Islam, because Islam's the, let's say, the latest religion. It's the most detailed and supposed to be the only international religion, let's just say. So that's a quick summary about Islam. Um, anyway, so from Islam, you've got the Quran, and in the Quran is a guidebook for all humanity, not just Muslims. And one verse to answer this question, why is being happy so hard, goes like this. And as to those who disbelieve in, let's say, God or happiness truths or ancient spiritual truths, their deeds are like a mirage in the desert. The thirsty one thinks it to be water until when he comes up to it, he finds it to be nothing. So you got a reference there, Holy Quran, chapter 24, verse 14. Do check out the references. All these things are available there in the description. Loads of links available for more information. Anyway, so what is that sort of poetry basically saying? It's saying chasing materialistic desires is like chasing a mirage. So if you don't know what a mirage is, it looks like water in hot countries in the distance, but it's just an illusion. Okay. And so that's very much like uh materialistic desires. You think, if only I had that other thing, and then the other thing, and the other thing, then I'll be happy. So you've got this thing in the distance. If only you had it, then you'll be happy. But it will never quench your thirst. So you're like a thirsty person, constantly wishing to be happy, but never quite happy. This so a mirage is an amazing metaphor for materialistic desires. It's always far away from you. It's never quite in your reach, and so it doesn't make you happy. And but what does make you happy are simple things like being in nature. Sometimes you can just be in nature, you can see some water flowing past you and just be in awe of it and just have a great conversation. You don't need much money. And this is proven by psychologists. So psychologists even use things like nature, just being around nature, to solve things like depression. So anyway, that intro done. What are your thoughts, Saleh?
I think it's right because nowadays people have different standards and different ideas of happiness. Like in the olden days, there was less things, less options that can make you happy. But nowadays, there's so many different options, starting to confuse people, and people don't know which one is the right one for them, since every individual finds their own happiness different ways.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing you said. So people have different standards. Okay, the thing is, I teach a lot of really rich people. Have taught especially some of the most expensive schools in this country, in England, and in the Middle East, and they basically try to act like street people, like cool people. Their standards aren't really that different. They just kind of want the same stuff. And then there's the multi, you hear of the really like the billionaires, their standards are really messed up standards. Like they've tried to buy everything and they're still not happy. So they go to drugs and do lots of weird things, yeah, and end up killing themselves and doing crazy stuff. So it's not really a higher standard. Um, yeah, and if and you say about in the old days when people had less stuff, you can go to some poorer countries and you'll see they're like really happy because they're not confused by all the different options you're talking about. So here's a funny thing about psychology. They've looked at shops, and where they've got too many choices, people are less likely to buy it. So if there's like 100 different toothbrushes, then you go, "Oh, which toothbrush should I buy?" It's called decision fatigue. It's like too hard, so people are less likely to buy. But if you have only three toothbrushes, you are much more likely to buy it. So there's a lot of hidden pressure put on people, and that actually makes them miserable because they can never know which one's the right one. And they've done other psychological tests where they said, like, whatever you buy, the other thing looks better. So kind of I agree with you, but in I'm just explaining that psychologists actually agree with you as well.
So what you're saying is that one of the main reasons I rich people are unhappy because they know the truth behind. If I bought that thing, it does actually make me happier than the thing I already had, because they basically find out the truths themselves, right?
They kind of find out the truth, but this is a funny thing. It's really easy to find out truths if you're honest with yourself, right? But we have this ego, you can call it, right? And it makes you say, you know what, I'm going to ignore the truth, the reality that even though I bought everything, I'm still not happy. Okay. So then you just keep chasing a mirage. And that's what this thing is. This verse of the Quran is saying, like, you just keep going around in circles. You buy something and you go, "Oh, I made a mistake. It wasn't the iPhone 10 that I wanted. I just need iPhone 11, and then I will be finally happy." And then when you get iPhone 11, you go, "Oh, no, no, no. Look, everybody's so happy. I've seen the adverts. They're all smiling when they've got iPhone 12." Right? And then they queue up for that. So they don't actually, they kind of know the truth, but like not just rich people, everybody denies the truth from themselves, right?
But isn't that mirage not purpose in a sense? And purpose can make someone happy like when they're closer to achieving their goal. Without purpose, people are just depressed. So they got no reason to live.
Right, that's an
So
interesting thing to
purpose
say.
gives them a reason to move on. So if you want an iPhone 12, you have to work hard to get that money. That's your purpose.
So it depends which purpose you have, right? Okay, so those people, if you ask them when they want the iPhone 12 and they don't have the iPhone 12, they're going to say, "I will be happy. I'm not happy at the moment. I will be happy when I get the iPhone 12." They have a if then but relationship, like if then relationship with happiness. If I have this, then I will be happy. But those same people, if you ask them when they were kids, they say, "What were the list of things you wanted that would make you happy?" And then you ask them, "Do you have those things?" And they'll say, "Yeah, I've got all of those things, but a million times more." And they say, "Are you happy now?" And they say, "No," right? Because it's a never ending, it's called a hedonic treadmill. So there's a name for that. Like, there's a hamster treadmill, like a hamster
Hmm.
wheel. Yeah. And the wheel, the hamster's going like crazy, but it's getting nowhere. That's what materialism is. You're going like crazy, but you're getting nowhere. You're not happier. In fact, you're just getting more miserable because you're just buying more and more stuff and more crazy stuff. Yeah. And it doesn't make you happy. So yeah. um yeah. Any thoughts about that?
I still think it's something that people would work towards, because if someone's purpose is finished, then that's not good. So pe- it isn't that bad that people are tricking themselves to going for more. So let's say you're doing push-ups, you say to your brain one more, you do one more, but then you keep on doing another one, another one, another one. You don't stop.
Yeah, so yeah, you just reminded me actually. So it's like what purpose you choose for yourself can make you happy. So it's really important. You're absolutely right. You need a purpose, and your body is designed to chase for a purpose. So there's a system in your body to create dopamine. You probably know about it because you're into sort of health and fitness, maybe. Have you heard of dopamine?
Something like that, yeah.
It's one of the chemicals that make you happy, the serotonin,
Mm.
dopamine, all the oxytocin, lots of different things, right? Dopamine is designed to make you happy if you have a plan and you follow that plan and you are working towards it. Okay, so you're right, you do need a purpose. So that there is a rush towards achieving stuff, that's good. Okay, but the things that really make you happy is a meaningful purpose, and I've talked about this many times on the show. The meaning is what psychologists tell you that we need to be happy, and very, very few people know that. In fact, people make fun of this idea, like, oh, what's the meaning of life? I was watching a movie called um the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or something, right? And they go, "Oh, the meaning of life is 42," right? Okay, like that's a typical joke, right? There's no meaning of life apparently, right? So people make fun of it, but actually there is a meaning of life. We can actually find meaning of life. The thing that it gives you meaning are good things, making the world a better place. That's not exactly it, but it's along those lines. So yeah, if you pick the right purpose, that will really make you happy. Average purpose will make you medium happy, and bad purposes will just keep you miserable. Just like people are just constantly just chasing materialism, plain materialism. Okay. Um, okay, so next bit, question 2. So this is all part of um, what it is that is required to be happy, and I've breaking it down into 3 questions. Again, do join in the chat, just make your comments, disagree with me, um so I've got Salah here to kind of participate, because I know most people don't participate too much. So he's here by purpose, trying to disagree, maybe, or whatever it comes to his mind. Anyway, so how can we easily flip our mindset away from materialism? So in the first question, I basically said, materialism plain by itself, it's not going to make you happy. Having stuff, you do need to eat stuff. Yeah, you need some basic things, right? But above that, those things don't actually make you happy. So maybe it's an idea to what's an easy way to flip away from that, since most people are addicts to materialism? How can you get away from that illusion that we keep creating in front of ourselves? So here's a saying from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, again from Islam. There are similar things in different religions, but you'll find in Islam you'll have the most precise teachings about what to do to improve your life. Okay, and that's because it's the most evolved, it's the latest teachings. Okay, so other teachings were tribal religions for very ancient times, where you had less possibilities, less choices, and less complicated lives. Anyway, so it says, be in this world if you're a stranger or a traveler. Okay, the example of this world and myself, said Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, uh, is that of a rider who seeks shade under a tree, then he moves on and leaves it behind. Okay, so there's different pictures he's trying to create there, but it's the idea of being a traveler. So thinking like a traveler makes you hyper grateful for the world you live in. So if you think about it, I've talked to, the other day I was talking to somebody in the playground when I was taking care of my baby, little one, right? I was talking to an adult, and he was saying like, "Oh, where are you from?" Because he had an accent. So I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Oh, I'm from America." And he goes, "I love it here in London." I said, "Okay, what do you love about here?" And he says, like, he's talking about lots of tiny things. Yeah, and that's what happens when you go traveling. You notice all the tiny things. You become hyper aware of the tiny things. Okay, and so you'll find more and more it's the tiny things that actually make you happier. And there's a good reason for that, and I'll quickly go into it. It's because happiness, you'll find, and we've talked about it a lot, there's kind of a small bandwidth of how excited you can get and how depressed you can get. Okay, it's not very big. Okay, and so there's not much space for happiness in the ups and downs of life. Okay, but happiness is in depth. So if you go for the small things and you really go into them, they're more likely to provide happiness, because you're not deluding yourself by going to extremes like taking drugs, thinking that's going to make you happy, and you're not putting any meaning. Is taking drugs is not that meaningful usually, right? Anyway, so kind of gone deep a little bit onto that, but the idea is, often people are really excited when they're travelers. right? And you feel really excited about small things, and those small things really are the things that build a connection. If you go to anybody who's traveled, we've traveled, me and you, right? Think about those things that you found really exciting, be really small, funny things. Like maybe, I don't know, tell me one thing when you went to Jordan, Saleh. Tell me one memory. Try not to like filter it, like try to think of the first one.
The bus doors open on the motorway.
Right, how small is that, right? But it's ridiculous, right? Because it's like when he's saying that, like the doors are still open when it's going 100 miles, well, not 100 miles an hour because they don't go that fast, right? But they like whatever speed they go, the door's wide open. It's quite funny, right? It's just ridiculous stuff like that. And it's a nice breeze, the weather's great, blah, blah, blah. Really small things, okay?
Well,
So,
small things depends on your natural environment. Let's say your natural environment is to walk around with a suit. A small thing is someone wearing a huge thing is someone wearing a hoodie. But if someone wears a hoodie casually, then it's a small thing for them. So it
yeah,
depends
they
on the
get used
environment
to
you're
it.
brought up in. So a small thing for you is a big thing for someone else. So
Yeah,
it's not really good
so
to judge.
actually that is kind of my point about traveling. Traveling gives you a different mindset, right? And like, oh, like that's a bit different, right? Okay. But isn't it a shame that you have to go to a whole different country to notice the same small things you might have in your own country? Like somebody else comes to your country, like comes to London and goes, "Oh, London is amazing because of this small thing," right? Okay. And so if you realize that you are always a traveler, because you are on planet Earth for a short amount of time, right? You
Mm.
are a tourist on planet Earth. And if you have the mindset that you are only here for a short while, that is a really powerful way of adjusting how you think. Okay. Steve Jobs, do you know who Steve Jobs is, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Apple guy, right? Okay. He said, live every day as if it's your last, right? And when you live like that, then you're not fearful of what other people think. You just care about doing the right thing that will make you happy right now. So that's kind of it as well, that helps. But also, living like every day as if you're lost is also a teaching of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And that, if you can think like that, you'll just become more alert to the things you do have. um and also, a bit more into like the Steve Jobs direction about why he said, and he's got a really famous speech. It's called a Stanford commencement speech. Basically, he was at Stanford University, one of the top universities in the world. So do check that up when he talks about this thing. And basically he says like, don't care about what other people think, because those people will limit you about what you really want to do. Because when you care about what other people think, you end up just following them and being miserable like them. Okay. So and what most people are trying to do in their whole lives, they're always so scared that something's going to go wrong that they try to keep spending money and getting comfortable, padding their house up with a nice sofa or painting their wall for the 100th time or something, right? And they stay in this really safe zone where they don't really do interesting things. That is what I call the comfort trap. So I said, so knowing you are only here for a short while helps you avoid the comfort trap and instead focus on what matters. So instead of, yeah, go on.
Yeah, but isn't no caring about what other people think also being political in a good way? Because no one can achieve success by themselves. Success is defined by where you are compared to others. So everyone else can bring you down if they wanted to. And let's say you know how you're making these shows and stuff.
Hmm.
If everyone wants to keep on reporting you, YouTube would eventually take you down, right?
Hmm.
So you do need others at the same time.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting point. So not so when I say I don't care what other people think, that's kind of a very simplified version of it. And it goes something like, yeah, mostly I don't really care what people think. Like, I'm not bothered what they think, but I listen to what they're saying to give me tips because I'm interested in helping people. So I'm interested. I go, okay, that's what you say. Okay, I might not necessarily agree, but remember that the people listening and the people giving me feedback, okay, they're the people that in a way they're telling me they care enough to give me feedback, right? So I'm going, right, okay, I'm listening and I want to help you guys. So I'm trying to hear from your point of view so I can help you more, right? That's the only extent to which I care. And then there was another interesting point. Like, most people fear failure, so they don't even start. Okay, they go, oh, this
Mm.
could go wrong, that could go wrong. Now, I can't fail because even if YouTube shuts me down today, right? You can't fail in a way when you've done the right thing. You tried your best, you did. That's all you can say. There's no failure after that because the point is, I don't know if I'm going to ever impact anybody ever. I'm just going to do the right thing to try to, and then you like yourself for doing that. So there's no failure in that sense. I can't lose, is the point. Yeah. Um, and people who live like that really just can't lose. They just enjoy life, and things usually tend to go right with a positive mindset as well. Anyway, that's and a lot of things go wrong. Actually, that's worth saying as well. So a lot of things go wrong, and the people who've got like they care about what other people think and all this kind of stuff, they give up really early. So anyway, and success hardly ever is easy. Like Mr. Beast, for example, your one of your favorite YouTubers, took 10 years before anybody even noticed him. Like he was a kid when he started, and his mum was against him. Everybody was against him until when he finally became successful. Anyway, so question three. This is still talking about um, the reality of life. Like finding happiness is not that hard. So just to remind people about what this main topic is, and breaking it down into the third part is what is the one thing we need to be happy. Right? Wouldn't it be nice if we knew the one core thing that is required to be happy? And so again, back to the Holy Quran. Most definitely, it says, it is the remembrance of Allah, the one God, that hearts can find comfort. Okay, um, so it's telling you a truth that you can test for yourself. Okay, so psychologists tell us. So I talk about nature as a reflection of God, right? So if you see, the more pure nature you see, like if you're just looking at the sea, right? There's nothing special about the sea, it's just water, right? Okay, but somehow it's makes you feel tranquil or something, right? If you see pure tree, but if you stick a building in the middle, stops having its effect, right? So I would say I would describe nature as a reflection of God's work, of God Himself, right? Okay, so we know psychologists tell us being in nature has a mysterious effect of making us happier. We are slowly coming back to the realization that our souls are attracted towards God, without whom we cannot find peace. So, that's a claim. You can test it. Just think about God anytime, and you just let your mind focus on God, and somehow that gives more meaning to your life. Okay, and logically, just want to go into it a little bit logically. Okay, everything is temporary. Everything in life is temporary. Collecting it is in a way meaningless, right? But nothing could be more meaningful than to have a relationship with the creator who will never disappear, right? Who's the boss, right? Like if you're in a room and there were, I don't know, a couple of ants there, and there was another human being, and that human being was really rich and powerful, you wouldn't start making friends with the ants. You would make friends with the king in the room, right? That's God. Like there's nothing more meaningful. And deep down, we know there's nothing more meaningful. But God is incredibly beautiful as reflected in his work, which is nature. Anyway, any thoughts?
No, really, I agree with it.
Okay. So it's quite hard, though, isn't it? I think in the modern world where we're so obsessed with materialistic things to accept that, that God is all we really need. But as we start reflecting on our lives and the tiny things that actually make us happy, you kind of begin to realize there's deep and small things that make us happy. And so um like, when are we happy? So what is it like? Okay, so just remembering God is not exactly enough, right? It helps, but what God tells us in Islam is actually, the meaning of Islam is to let go of your will, like your ego, and listen to God instead. And that is the recipe for a thing called peace. So Islam has two meanings. It's kind of two sides of a coin. On one side, its meaning is peace. On the other side, its meaning is, Arabic is like a bit complicated like that. It's got like loads of meanings. It's not like English, right? English can have some meanings, but Arabic is a lot deeper and more exact, kind of more mathematical, right? So on one side, Islam means peace, and the other part of the translation is let go of your ego and listen to God instead, right? So it's kind of like the recipe for peace is to stop listening to your crazy ego, which keeps saying, giving you short term ideas. Oh, buy the iPhone. Oh, buy the house. Buy the more expensive car so you can show off to people. Then people will like you and then you'll be happy. That's the short term thinking. Okay. It's a thing that makes you crazy. If you finally just let go of that, okay, and you go, you know what? If I just do what God wants me to do, and what does God want me to do? Okay, to be good, do kind of seemingly boring things like go on this show, for example, right? But deep down, you start feeling good about yourself, like you're doing something that means something. And you know that people, that if you study the world, people are suffering so much. Like in London, people are suffering from loneliness, right? So if you go on this show and you talk about, oh, you know what, you can stop being lonely if you talk to your neighbors, or be respectful to your parents, so you actually have a relationship with your own parents. Yeah, it's not like people are born in this world and they don't have family, right? So if you just start doing these things that God wants you to do, God doesn't need anything from you, then you just start feeling happy. And if you ignore your ego, then you stop doing stupid things that don't make you happy and distract you from happy. And anyway, what do you think?
Ego is a very complicated subject. It depends on the person, but ego can push someone, can make someone dedicated to something. It's like giving it purpose, but at the same time, it's always constant pressure because in order to be good at something, you have to train yourself to be better at it. And training is very continuous and takes a lot of motivation in order to do it. You can't just say, I'm there, I finished, ego satisfied. Your ego would always push for more because that's human nature. You'd always want more no matter what you have.
100% agreed. And so the Quran doesn't even talk about words like ego. It's just I'm just using that word. It talks about the soul and the different stages of the soul and what the soul needs. Okay, so there's three stages, which is the animal stage where you just going for just fulfilling your basic needs. So there's no real difference between you and an animal. An animal, you don't see a lion, sitting one day and deciding, you know what, I think it's really bad eating meat. I'm going to be a vegan. You don't see that, right? They have their natural instincts and they follow it, right? So then, if you just follow your natural instincts, you're not more than an animal, okay? But you don't really fulfill. You don't feel fulfilled until you start on this really difficult climb of making the right choices, and you will keep failing, but you will feel good about yourself by making those choices, good choices. So agree. So, and I also agree with you. Part of, in another way, um, part of what God wants you to do is be on a never-ending um, climb for improvement. Okay, there's a word called Rahim, which means the person. So one quality of God is Rahim, which is on top of giving you everything for free, like air and all this kind of the water and whatever you need. He encourages you to grow. You're designed to grow on forever. But grow, you can grow either in a selfish way, which will make you miserable, or grow in a productive way, in kindness and things like that. And those are the things that really make you happy. And that's what psychologists say as well. Like when you share with other people, it makes you more happy than just having stuff, just buying stuff for yourself. So, in
Mm.
really good points. Let's go for questions. Again, guys, do join in the live chat if you feel, but I do have a couple of questions lined up if you don't have any yourself. Okay. Okay, so really important question in the current climate in the world. Should there be limits on free speech? And so, what kind of limits could there be? Like, if there's misinformation nowadays, governments around the world are saying, you know, anybody talks about COVID vaccines being bad, that's misinformation. And then there's, uh, if you're criticizing something, anybody, if you, for example, somebody criticizes Prophet Muhammad or something, people go, "Oh, you're insulting. You're not allowed to be insulting. You have to say in a different way." That's somebody's opinion, isn't it? If you're insulting, somebody's saying, "No, I'm not being insulting," right? Or there's a different sort of treatment. So if I give my point of view and then you ignore me for the rest of my life, then I won't really feel like giving my point of view anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So, like, should any of those things ever happen? Okay, and so here's again from the Holy Quran the answer according to I think, and feel free to disagree, anybody out there or Saleh. And the servants of the gracious, and gracious again is that word I briefly mentioned earlier on from Arabic called Rahman, which means like just kind to everybody. Like even if they're not kind to you, you don't care. You're just like kind, full stop. You're not like putting labels on people and saying I'm going to be kind to this or not. It's just a kind to everyone. Okay. So the servants of the gracious God are those who walk on the earth modestly, and when the ignorant address them, they say peace. Okay, so it's kind of describing the way people who are supposed to represent God. Okay, uh, people are servants of God, and therefore they're servants of humanity. This is how they should do. So I'll just quickly summarize. If we make it an aim to be kind to everyone, whether they agree with our point of view or not, we would actually have enough patience to learn from each other, which is the benefit of free speech. So, I mean, that's a very short summary of what that verse of the Holy Quran mean. But any thoughts about that? Like, what could be a problem with that?
I think
Or
that's good, but my personal opinion is that limiting certain things from free speech is good. But the one problem with that idea is that who decides and who gave them the right to decide? If you give the government the right to decide, they can say anything against us is not allowed, like in North Korea or something like that. But if you let the people decide, then they can be biased because the majority wins. So that's the only problem with it. So I think that was the best answer, the one you said, because it
mm,
has the least amount of flaws.
yeah, cool. And by the way, the reason why this topic is so important, most of the powerful Western countries are controlling what you say on YouTube. So they'll shut down your video if you say the wrong thing. Yeah. And it's not like you're saying bad stuff. Like, for example, in terms of vaccines, some of the top vaccine experts in the world, the people who designed the original technology, are the ones that are like saying, oh, we should be careful about the vaccine because of this, that, and the other. And then YouTube are shutting down those videos, taking those experts off. Right. And this is like in the UK, in America, in Canada, and so many other places. They're not only doing that in Canada, they're even controlling your bank account if you disagree with them, right? It's going really crazy. So forget North Korea, it's happening all over the world, right? In China, it's already always the case, but anyway. Um, but then people say if you're just too nice, that doesn't help in it because if you're just too nice, then what happens is people who say, let's say you're a racist, right? And I'm just
Hmm.
like, I don't really argue with you, okay, then how is that going to improve anything? Just being nice isn't good enough either, is it? right? So there's a secret plan in this verse, okay, and it's based on human nature. Okay, the reason why people are angry and racist and all this kind of stuff because they're sad inside. People aren't nasty for no reason. Okay, so like if you research like about bullies, for example, bullies are usually bullies because they're bullied at home. Like that kind of problem. They part. This is like there's so many examples of that, right? If you're abusive or something, then you're abused by. So to kind of break that cycle, okay, you have to win people's hearts. You have to demonstrate that it can be possible to be good. Okay, so what is culture? Culture is lots of examples of behavior, right? And if in the culture everybody's like sad faced, then everybody copies being sad. Like in this London, people don't smile at each other on the streets, okay, because they think that's a bit scary. So that's culture. Okay, but if you go to other places, there are places where people say, "Why are you not smiling at me? Is there something wrong?" Or why are you not saying hello? Is there something wrong? Are you being rude to me by not saying hello? Right? So in different countries, you have different standards. Okay, so why don't we set a new standard where you're trying to be nice to people without labeling? And it's very important not to label too much nowadays. Okay, I mean, you can label to understand the world, right? But you don't label to your labeling of somebody like, oh, he's Asian or Pakistani, therefore he's going to behave like that. Always going to be inaccurate because there's all different kinds of Pakistanis. There's different kinds of, I don't know, gay people, different kinds of whatever, right? Even if you put the label on them, it doesn't mean everything about them. Okay, so you can label them, okay, in your own way just to understand them a little bit, right? But you shouldn't be unkind to them too much because of it. Now, on the other side, this verse of the Quran explains another thing. It's like, what happens if somebody's shouting at you and being racist to you? Do you just stay there and smile at them? No. What you do is you say you don't hate them, but you go past them and come back to them sometime in the future. And because you didn't show them hate, okay, one day you will soften them up enough, maybe, and they'll learn. That's the most effective way. But arguing with somebody who doesn't want to listen to you, they just get more angry. And they listen to you even less because their ego is saying, I want to win the debate. So these teachings are all about human nature, how it really works.
Yeah,
Any thoughts? I talked quite a lot, didn't I?
that's fine.
Yeah. Um So what else is there? Differential treatment. So you try not to treat people worse. You try to treat people really well. And it goes right back to the beginning of the verse, the servants of the gracious God. The the God who gives lots of free stuff is very kind to everybody, even if they don't believe in God or listen to God or do anything right or even do bad things. They still get air, they still get water, they still get so many things, you know. And if you're like that, so if you're a servant of that God, then that is the way we're going to make the world a better place. The that a happy place is, so why is there even a whole discussion about free speech? It's because people are fighting so much. So I want to say this, and the next person says, I want to say that. But if people are just nice to each other, it wouldn't even be an issue. Be like, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's learn something. Yeah. You don't have issues about free speech in school, isn't it? Or maybe you do actually.
Yes,
Yeah, the
a
teacher
lot.
says, be quiet. Yeah, be quiet. Stop. You don't have free speech in class. Okay. Maybe that's not a good example. I'm not sure. Uh, yeah, maybe that's a bad example. I don't know. All right. But yeah, but let's just say if people are friends, amongst their friends, right? You don't go, I want the right to talk. Why are you stopping me talk? Because if you're friends, you let each other talk anyway, right? So you want to get into a situation where this is not a big deal. Like free, everybody's got free speech. It's no big deal. Okay. And ideally, right? You're not going to be rude to each other. So in Islam, there's loads of things I haven't talked about, but in Islam it says like, don't even say a truth if it's going to encourage somebody to insult you back. Like Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, don't say Prophet Muhammad is better than Prophet Moses, for example, because then those people might who believe in Prophet Moses will say, "Oh, Prophet Muhammad is terrible," whatever. Don't say things unnecessarily unless you really have to say them. There's not much benefit in saying them. Yeah. So you're trying to always, in short, have a mindset of I'm here not to win a debate, not to make myself feel good necessarily directly, but to make the world a better place. With that mindset, we solve all the problems. Okay. Um, question 2. So here's a funny thing. I'm going to talk about the same verse from a completely different, well, fairly different perspective. Okay, whoops, I just clicked on, I don't know what I clicked on. There we go. All right, so how do you avoid getting frustrated with people? Okay, and again, the same verse. So it's going to be interesting. How do I flip that? Okay, and the servants of the gracious God are those who walk in the earth modestly, and when the ignorant address them, they say peace. Okay, and so short commentary is if we want the world to be better, we should avoid the negative emotion of being frustrated and replace it with wanting to serve everyone with less discriminations. There's a red line underneath it. What's the proper spelling? Probably okay. All right. So that we can heal our fractured society. So, yeah, I'll let you say something before I kind of explain that in more detail.
Mm. Well, I see the point you're getting is that if you're calm and you refuse to let yourself get angry, then you can't really be frustrated because you're not trying to win anything. Because frustration comes when you're losing from something. You can only lose when you're trying to win.
Wow, yeah, I'm not even sure if that's what I was saying, but that is really true. Like when you're trying to win, if you're trying to make the world a better place, then like that's not an easy job anyway, but you're not going to be frustrated because you're like if you're in it for the long term, it's like okay, I knew somebody's going to try to mess it up, but I'm more interested in just trying to make it better. So I suppose, yeah, yeah, okay. Um, so okay, let me just see some of my notes because what did I have in mind when I said that? Oh no, on the wrong file. Okay. Okay, in the verse begins by saying that if you, I'm just reading. Oh, by the way, in the description are like short answers I've given to this, and yeah, I'm trying to think about the angle that I had in mind. The verse begins by saying that if you think you are a servant of God, then as God is gracious or gives us rain, sun, air, and so many other things to everyone, then you should too. By being gracious in this way, you will do the opposite of what has become the norm of individualism in our modern societies. In individualistic societies, we see other people are annoyances because individualistic people only really see things from their own perspective. This is why people are increasingly using the word toxic with regards to other people. Do you ever hear that, Salah? People saying that person's toxic. I hear that on a lot of social media
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah, so this person's toxic. That, but like they're toxic for incredibly small reasons. For this reason, and slowly everybody sort of becomes toxic, as it were. Okay, to the extent that now people often prefer the less intelligent and less fulfilling relationship of animals. So they go like, everybody's so horrible. You know what? I just like rather be friends with a dog, and that's really common. You hear that a lot. Yeah, like I'm better with animals. Have you ever heard that? Maybe it's just more adult thing. I don't know.
I think so a bit.
A bit, yeah. I think when people get really frustrated over a long period of time, so when they grow up and they really fail at relationship with other human beings, then maybe when they're adults they get to that stage, right? Okay. So, but I do hear it a lot. Okay. So, By being kind to everyone without labeling others as different in some way, we ourselves benefit. We increase the opportunity to connect, learn, and share. So that's what we want. We want to connect with people. We want to have a good conversation. We want to learn from people, right? So that's kind of the benefit of not being frustrated with people. When you're frustrated with people, you're in a tiny little box, you don't learn anything, and you stay miserable. Okay. Okay, and you like to share things with people. We like to go, oh look, this is some stuff I've done, I've this work I've done. But if you're frustrated with everybody, you don't get to share your experience of life with anybody. Okay, so that's another thing. And then this is how we make happier societies. Happiness is togetherness. You find, if you try it, that happiness is for the generous. So that's kind of quoting another saying of Prophet Muhammad. The paradise is the home of the generous, is the actual quote, but it basically means so you can either be frustrated. So, in a sort of summary, you can either be frustrated with people and hateful toward people, and that's quite easy. It's really easy. I get frustrated, by the way. I don't want to say like you have to be perfect, right? It's kind of like a never-ending thing you can improve on, and as every time you improve, you'll find you're happier. So if I'm often frustrated with people. Why aren't they doing something better? Why are they not applying their intelligence as much as they should do, right? Okay, but then when I do that, I'm the one who loses, because then I have less people to talk to. Okay, because if I'm frustrated with them, I'm not going to really enjoy talking to them, right? But then if I go, you know what, I'm here to help people, and I go in that mindset, then I end up talking to loads of people I wouldn't normally talk to. So that's a nice little trick you can apply. And in fact, in an individualistic society, hardly anybody talks to hardly anybody, right? Okay, even in our family, people don't really take the time to pick up the phone and say, and we're all friends in the family, whatever, but they don't pick up the phone and say, you know what, how you doing, how whatever. But if, like, so I have a system where each month I'll call up a cousin, right? And I'll say, how you doing? And I don't do it because I'm like, oh, I'm missing talking to them or something. It's like, that is the right thing to do. But then I enjoy and have really interesting conversations with them about what's happening in their lives. And I feel better about it because I know I'm basically being a good person. And there's a funny thing. So there's a funny thing called your soul, or no, let's talk about it in scientific terms. Something called your conscience. Now, you might say conscience is some sort of airy fairy thing, but if you have you ever heard of Freud? Freud, psychologist,
Yes.
right? So him, I think he's the beginning. He's one of the first people who said this, right? He said you've got different personalities within you,
Mm.
like because they act differently to the choices you're making. Like if you do a bad thing, okay, your conscience will tell you off, even though you don't want your conscience to tell you off. You want to get away, you want to do the bad thing, you escape the law, and you're saying, yes, I've done the bad thing. But you've got this weird thing called your conscience, which behaves as a separate being, and it's like saying, nope, that's not good enough, and it keeps telling you off inside your brain, right? So um, so what was I talking about? Discrimination. Yeah. So doing good things really makes you. So rather than being the person who gets frustrated and is selfish and all this kind of stuff, do this weird thing where you do things only because it's the right thing to do. Okay, and even better, like do things because you know that this is more convincing and more motivating if you know God is watching you. And we've talked about this before, and I'll probably have to repeat it a million times. The other day I was talking to a student and he accidentally saw one of my web pages, and it said the scientific proof that God exists. And he was like, oh, isn't science the opposite of the exist, like God and all this kind of airy fairy stuff? And I explained to him really quickly, like hemoglobin. Ever heard of hemoglobin?
Yes.
Where do you get it? Do you know? Science
Blood
test,
cells.
blood cells, right? Okay, you get like 270 million of them in like uh or no, 270 million of them in tiny drop, and then you've got millions of hemoglobins just in one blood cell, whatever. Okay, to have one hemoglobin created, okay, it would take longer than the age of the universe, like trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of times longer than the age of the universe if it mutated randomly, okay, every millisecond. And it will still not be made. That's how complicated it is. So we underestimate how complicated it is. So to make a single drop of blood should have been impossible. To make a human being, it's not even imaginable, right? Okay, so that's how complex we are and how unlikely it is that God does not exist. If it was random, basically there's no chance that it is random. So definitely it's designed and created by God. Um, so if you know God is watching you and you do things to say impress God, as it will, listen to God, then that's going to make you happy. Well, last question, where's my last question? Here it is, question 3. Okay, so how do you find the right job? So I know lots of people who really struggle. They they um they try different jobs, it doesn't work out, and they give up and whatever, and then they end up not having a job, or if they have a job, they really, really hate it. Okay, and they get stuck in those kind of jobs, right? So anyway, how do you find the right job? Quick answer: the upper hand is better than the lower hand. The upper hand is the one that gives, and the lower hand is the one that takes. Prophet Muhammad, what's that all about? It's kind of a bit like, it's like being a servant of the gracious God from the other verse I was talking about. Like, you should be here not waiting for something, but trying to give as much as you can, as much as realistically possible. Whatever your situation is, yeah. Maybe you can't do without taking or something, but do whatever you can to give as much as possible. Why is that important? Okay, so being of service makes human beings happy. That's one thing, right? So if you aim to start with any job, so you get any job you can, right? Okay, so rather than relying on the government, if you can, avoid it as much as you can, right? And then that will develop two things in you. It will develop skills and confidence. So if you're not ever doing a job and you're 100% relying on the government, you will slowly lose confidence that you're capable of anything. But when you're doing a job, your confidence will go up. You say, look, I'm actually doing something. I'm a practical person. But also, you learn skills by doing things. And if you do it, so you can do a job really badly, and then you're the amount of stuff you learn is really limited. But if you keep trying to do a job over and above the requirements, so that I was working on a checkout long time ago, right, when you were like 1 year old or something, okay, and I would not just do the checkout job. I would I would have I would make interesting conversations with the customers, so much so that and by the way, I would be the slowest person because I would be, talking to them, right? Okay, but people would join my slow queue just to have an interesting conversation with me, because people didn't have too many people to talk to, and it was the end of the day, they're really tired, and they'd like to have a little bit of an interesting conversation, right? I even got like a prize. I mentioned, just like from the shop for that, right? Some sweets or something. Okay, so yeah, that's just the point of that, is like, by going by doing by trying to be as useful to people as possible without expecting anything back, you're the one who wins. You are fine. You get happier by being of service, but you're also learning. You learn also, so I don't know, talking skills or something, yeah, which, I'm a teacher. That's going to be useful, isn't it? Yeah. And that's actually one of my strengths as a teacher. And this is what other teachers have said, right? Because teachers review teachers, right? That your thing is that you're good at motivating students. You make them feel good about their ability and things like that. So, right. So, I'm just saying how things connect. They do connect. If you keep working on things, they do connect, and that goes back to The old. Did you ever listen to that Steve Jobs talk? I probably made you watch it once.
I watched a bit of
Stan,
it.
right? Do you remember him talking about the dots connecting? Ever heard that bit? Because he tells three stories. One of them is about the dots connecting.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Okay, so that's a really important, really weird thing that happens in life, right? And it's actually not that weird if you think about it logically, right? He basically says, like, do things you care about and do them really well, and then later on in life, they will help you. Okay, so his example was so right now on computer screen you can see lots of fonts. Do you know what fonts are? Like
Yeah, it's style of writing.
styles of writing. In the old days, in the beginning of computers, they all looked the same. There's one style of writing, right? Okay, so it's actually quite an amazing thing to have different styles of writing, and it's actually really complicated to do style of writing. So if you look at the word being, okay, can you see the I in being? Oh, you're looking on a tiny phone, aren't
Yeah,
you? Okay, that takes a tiny bit of space compared to the N, for example, which is much wider. Okay, but in the old days, they all take up the same amount of space. Imagine how rubbish that would look. It'd be really hard to read. Okay, so it's actually a very clever art to be able to create fonts. Okay, so what Steve Jobs did, he quit university, but he actually hung around somehow. He was allowed to go to the courses, and he just went to the things he was interested in. And one of them at his university was how to make fonts, how to handwrite fonts. And in those days, there was no computer that used fonts, and he had no interest in computers. Many years later, when he was designing the Mac, this is the way he described it, right? Of the Mac, the Apple computers, right? That came together then, right? So the point is, you don't know how things are going to work together, how the dots are going to join together, as it were. Does that kind of make sense, that metaphor, dots connecting together? Like you did this, you did that, you did
yeah.
that. Somehow it all works out, right? So, but why does that logically make sense? Because if you keep learning, if you keep developing yourself, you're actually putting value in yourself. You're making yourself more powerful. So eventually, all that useful information is going to be connected together and work together. And that happens to me all the time, right? So, for example, somebody asked me to make a website for free, right? Yeah, I'm part of the Muslim community, so are you, right? And in the Muslim community, there's lots of volunteers helping each other out. And somebody asked me, for the student organization many years ago, make this website, okay, using a technology called WordPress. And at that time, I'd never heard of WordPress. Okay, have you heard of WordPress?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So at that time, I never heard of WordPress, but the person was really rude when they're talking. I remember that person being really rude, and um, basically, but I wasn't rude back to him, and I just learned a little bit about WordPress because they said use WordPress, and I said okay, fine. But then I made many websites using WordPress. I'm using my current website, you know, that bigquestionsanswer.com uses WordPress. I've made many websites which I was paid for, right? So again, dots connect all the time, and a simple thing is if you do good things, if you help people, you get out into the world, and you get experiences, things like that. If you're selfish and you say, I'm only going to do this if somebody pays me, I'm only going to do this if they're nice to me, and all this kind of stuff, you're getting a tiny world and you don't learn much, you don't have any skills, and then you can't do cool and amazing things and get paid for more and more things, more and more high level expensive things. Um, and what about you, Sada? So, what are your plans of becoming really successful? You're very young. You got a long way to go. Um, what would your plan be to become really successful?
Personal training route,
How do you think you could learn to become like better than everybody else, for example?
experience, try new things and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So yeah. So when you do stuff if you volunteer for things, you will bump into people who will tell you about things that are beyond your like your scope of imagination. Yeah, like when I did the WordPress thing, never heard of that, even though it's out there on the internet. It's one of the most popular things, but I didn't do a Google search, right, for that. Like it's just, it was outside the limited view that I had at the time. But then I bump into somebody who's got completely different views and ways of looking at things, and he bumped into somebody else, and it's like they all bump into each other. We all affect each other. And if you listen to people, um, you're more likely to benefit from them, rather than, if you kind of get frustrated and angry and stuff like that, then you're less likely to learn from people and less likely to have an interesting life and stuff like that, because cool stuff happens when you're all learning from each other. Anyway, really appreciate you. That's the end of the show. Really appreciate you, Saleh, for joining the show last minute. um, my younger
Mm.
brother couldn't make it, he got stuck somewhere. But anyway, thank you very much for everybody who watched the show. Please do press the like button if you thought you learned something useful from it. I don't want you just to press the like button for no reason, but also the benefit of, I don't get any money from doing this. If you press the like button and you think you got something from it, then, hopefully YouTube, on seeing all these likes, will possibly, forward this video to other people, recommend it to other people. Do join me next week. I'm always here. Have your questions available, and ask me your questions, whatever you want. Even ask me questions in the non-live comments. I'm always checking them out and responding to them. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you. Catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye.